Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty critical if you work with the federal government.
Yeah, we're diving into the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, CMMC,
Yeah,
specifically Level 1.
exactly. And we're basing this on the official CMMC Assessment Guide Level 1. This is version 2.13 from September 2024. Pretty current.
It is, and it really lays out what you need to know for those basic safeguarding requirements. Our goal here is to kind of unpack that for you, make it clear what protecting federal contract information, or FCI, actually involves at this level.
Okay, so let's start right there. FCI. What is it, according to the regs? The guide points to a couple of CFR sections.
Right. Basically, it's information the government gives you or that you generate for the government under a contract. And the key is, it's not meant to be released to the public.
So think sensitive contract details, project data, that sort of thing. But importantly, it's not stuff the government's already put out there publicly.
Or, just simple transactional stuff like invoices or payment details. That's generally excluded.
And CMMC Level 1, it boils down to 15 fundamental security requirements.
It does. And these aren't like brand new ideas pulled out of thin air. They actually line up directly with the requirements in FIR Clause 52.20421.
So if your organization is already on top of that FIR clause.
You've got a really solid starting point for Level 1. Yeah, a leg up.
Good to know. Now, this assessment guide, who's it really for?
Well, it calls out a few groups. OSA's organizations seeking assessment, so that's probably you listening if you need to comply. Also cybersecurity pros, and really anyone helping out with CMMC prep.
So it's meant to be a practical tool then for getting ready for and actually doing a Level 1 self-assessment.
Exactly. It's structured pretty logically, covers the assessment itself, compliance, defines some key CMMC terms, talks about the criteria and methodology, and then it breaks down each of those 15 requirements one by one.
Okay, let's stress that point. Level 1 is a self-assessment. The regulation, 32 CFR 170.15, makes that clear. It's you, the organization, looking at your own systems against those FAR requirements.
It's an internal checkup, basically, gauging your own security posture for FCI.
And does this mean you have to assess your entire company network?
Not necessarily. 32 CFR 170.19a clarifies that. The scope depends entirely on where that FCI actually is, where you process it, store it, or transmit it.
So it could be the whole infrastructure or maybe just specific segments, enclaves?
Exactly. You might isolate FCI onto a specific server or network segment, and then that becomes your assessment scope.
Okay. And doing the self-assessment, can you get help?
Oh, yeah. You can do it all internally, or you can bring in a third party to assist. Lots of companies do that.
And this seems important even with help. It's still officially a self-assessment, right? It doesn't actually get you a CMMC Level 1 certification.
That's a critical distinction. It doesn't lead to a cert. The outcome is your own assessment report, which you then have to submit, along with your score, into the SPRS system, Supplier Performance Risk System.
Right, SPRS. So no certificate, but you do get an official status recorded.
Yes. And before you even start assessing, you need to clearly define what's in scope. That's your CMMC assessment scope, again from 170.19a. It's drawing the line around the assets that specific systems, components, data that you're going to evaluate.
Like defining the boundaries of the examination. Makes sense.
Yeah, you need to know exactly what you're looking at.
Okay, the guide then defines some specific CMMC terms. Understanding the lingo is probably helpful.
Definitely. Let's touch on a few key ones. First, assessment itself. In CMMC talk, it's the process of testing or evaluating your security controls. Are they implemented right? Working as intended? Doing what they need to do?
And specifically for Level 1, the self-assessment is how an organization evaluates its own system to get that CMMC status of final Level 1 self.
Precisely. Then there's assessment objective. Think of these as specific statements about what needs to be true for a requirement to be met. They come from NIST SP 800-171A, mostly. You need to meet all the relevant objectives for a requirement.
Got it. Next is asset. Pretty broad term.
Yeah, NIST defines it as basically anything valuable, tangible stuff like servers, laptops, but also intangible things like your data, software, even your reputation.
Okay. And CMMC status.
That's the official result, right? Stored in SPRS. It shows you met the requirements for a given level. For final Level 1, self. You need that scored self-assessment done against your defined Level 1 scope.
And importantly for Level 1, you substitute FCI wherever the underlying NIST standards might mention CUI, controlled unclassified information.
Crucial point for Level 1, yes. CUI comes in at Level 2. For Level 1, it's all about FCI.
Then we have component like hardware, software, firmware. The individual pieces.
Right, a type of asset.
Mm-hmm.
An information system, or as that's the whole organized collection of resources, also a type of asset.
So moving on to how the assessment works, the criteria and methodology. The guide says Level 1 self-assessment uses objectives from NIST SP 800-171A, but adapted for FCI.
That's the core of it. And the actual doing of the assessment involves looking at specific things, the assessment objects.
Which could be documents, systems, activities, even people.
Exactly. And you evaluate those objects using specific methods. The guide lists 3 main ones: examine, interview, and test.
Okay, break those down. Examine.
That's reviewing things, looking at your policies, procedures, system plans, network diagrams, also inspecting hardware and software configurations, watching activities happen.
Interview seems obvious.
Yep, talking to the people involved. System admins, security folks, users, whoever has the relevant knowledge.
Test.
That's actively trying things out, exercising a security control, running a process, using a mechanism under specific conditions to see if it works correctly, like trying to access something you shouldn't to make sure the controls stop you.
Now, does an organization have to use all 3 methods for every single requirement?
No, and the guide emphasizes flexibility here. You choose the methods and objects that make sense. It's about being cost-effective while still getting enough confidence that you're meeting the requirement.
So you tailor the assessment approach. You don't need to, test every single user account if examining the account creation procedure gives you enough confidence.
Exactly. It's about smart assessment, not just ticking boxes exhaustively.
Okay, so you do the assessment using these methods. What are the possible outcomes for each requirement?
3 possibilities, according to the rules: met, not met, or not applicable.
And for Level 1, you need what? All METs.
You need either MET or NA for all 15 requirements to achieve compliance. No, not METs allowed.
Right, so what does MET actually mean?
It means all the applicable objectives for that requirement are satisfied. And you need final evidence, not just draft policies or plans.
What about exceptions, things that aren't quite perfect?
Ah, interesting point. The guide mentions that documented enduring exceptions, things with compensating controls in your system security plan, or even temporary deficiencies that have a solid plan of action with progress being made. Those can still result in a MET finding.
Okay, that's useful nuance. And not MET.
Simple. 1 or more objectives for that requirement aren't satisfied.
And NA is just. It doesn't apply to us right now.
Exactly. Maybe a requirement is about something your organization just doesn't do. And importantly, for scoring, NA is treated the same as MET-T.
But, and this sounds like a big but, if even one objective under a requirement is not met.
The entire requirement is considered not met. That's the rule. So you can't be 90% compliant on a requirement and pass it. It's all or nothing for each one.
Okay, that's strict. One more thing before we hit the requirements themselves. Can you use external services to meet these? Like cloud providers?
Absolutely. The guide mentions external service providers, or ESPs. If your cloud provider or your managed service provider is handling certain security controls for you, that can count towards a MET-P finding.
As long as you can demonstrate it, presumably. Show evidence.
Oh, for sure. You need proof that they're actually meeting those objectives on your behalf. This is common for things like physical security if you use a data center, or maybe some network protections.
Makes sense. And, that's where understanding your environment, maybe through something like a gap assessment, really helps. Knowing what you handle versus what an ESP handles.
Exactly. Companies like ours, Armada Cyber Defense, often help organizations figure that out, do that initial gap assessment to see where they stand before the formal self-assessment.
Okay, good point. Let's dive into the requirements themselves, starting with access control, AC. First one is AC.L1B.1.I, authorized access control.
Right. This is fundamental. Limit system access to only authorized users, processes acting for users, and authorized devices. Keep it locked down.
The objectives are pretty clear. Identify who and what is authorized, and then make sure access is actually limited to just them.
Yep. And how do you assess it? You examine policies, account management procedures, your system security plan, maybe logs. You talk to the people managing accounts. You can even test the process. Try creating an unauthorized account.
So it really centers on good account management practices.
That's a huge part of it. Do you have a list of who's allowed access? Do you actually check authorization before granting access? When you plug in a new printer, do you control its network access?
Simple stuff, but critical. Okay, next AC requirement. AC.L1-B.1.I, transaction and function control.
This builds on the first one. It's not just who can access, but what they can do once they're in. Limit users to only the transactions and functions they're actually permitted to perform.
So defining roles and permissions.
Exactly. Objectives are define those permitted actions and then enforce those limits. You'd look at access control policies again, maybe audit logs to see who did what, interview people responsible for setting up roles, test the controls. Can a user with read-only access actually modify a file?
Like role-based access control for a specific project team, right? Everyone has access only to what their job needs.
Perfect example. And using things like access control lists, ACLs, or adopting a default deny stance where access is blocked unless specifically allowed are key considerations here.
Okay, moving on to AC.L1B.1.3 external connections. This sounds important.
Very. You need to verify and control or limit connections to external systems, and also the use of those external systems. Think cloud services, partner networks.
So identify them, verify they're legit, and then control or limit the connection and how they're used.
Precisely. You'd examine policies, terms, and conditions you have with those external providers, your system plan, talk to the people who set up those agreements, test the controls. Can someone connect to an unapproved cloud service?
So this covers things like ensuring employees use company laptops for remote FCI work, maybe? Or only using approved cloud storage?
Exactly, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Key points are identifying all those external connections, having methods to authorize and verify them, and actively limiting how they can be used.
Last one, under access control, AC.1, ASHIBU.1.IV, control public information.
Yeah, this is about preventing accidental spills, controlling information that gets posted or processed on any systems accessible by the public, like your company website.
Don't want FCI ending up on the homepage.
Definitely not. Objectives are know who's authorized to post publicly, have procedures to prevent FCI from being posted, have a review process, actually do the reviews, and have a way to take stuff down if it gets posted by mistake.
Assessment involves looking at policies, procedures, training records, review logs, talking to the web team or marketing, testing the posting process maybe.
Right. A simple example is having a mandatory review cycle before any press release goes live on the website. Making sure there's an approval chain is crucial.
Okay, that covers access control. Next up, identification and authentication, IA. First is IA.L1-B.1.V identification.
Pretty basic, but essential. Uniquely identify users, processes acting for users, and devices trying to access your systems.
So everyone and everything gets a unique ID.
Basically, yes. Objectives are just that. Identify users, identify processes, identify devices. You look at policies, system logs, account lists, talk to sysadmins, test the ID mechanisms.
Example being, assigning unique employee IDs for network login.
Yeah. Or unique IDs for service accounts, or identifiers for managed devices. Got to know who or what is trying to connect.
Which leads directly into the next one, IA.L1B.1.VI authentication.
The other side of the coin. Once you've identified someone or something, you need to verify that identity before granting access. Prove you are who you say you are.
So authenticate users, processes, and devices.
Exactly. Examine policies, authenticator management procedures like how you handle passwords or tokens. Talk to the folks managing those. Test the login process.
This covers things like passwords, certificates, multi-factor authentication.
All of that. And critically, changing default passwords on new hardware or software. That's a big one.
Examples like resetting the default admin password on a new router, or requiring MFA for cloud service access.
Perfect. Key considerations include ensuring authenticators are unique, authenticating processes and service accounts properly, and maybe even using device identifiers as part of authentication.
Okay, let's switch gears to media protection and P. Just one requirement here at level 1, MPL1B.1.7 media disposal.
Right. This is about protecting FCI on physical media when you're done with it.
Okay.
You have to sanitize or destroy media containing FCI before you throw it out or reuse it.
Sanitize or destroy before disposal, sanitize before reuse. Seems clear.
It is. You'd look at your media sanitization policy, procedures, any logs of destruction or sanitization. Talk to the people responsible. Maybe test the process. See if data can be recovered from a supposedly wiped drive.
And this applies to hard drives, USB sticks, CDs, DVDs, even paper.
Yep, digital and non-digital media. The guide mentions methods like clearing, purging, cryptographed erasure, or just physically destroying it.
Right.
Shredding a CD with old project files, for instance.
Just to make sure it's really gone.
It's the idea. Proper erasure, encryption, or destruction.
All right, on to physical protection, PE. First is PE.L1B.1.8, limit physical access.
Keep people out of areas where they shouldn't be. Limit physical access to your systems, equipment, and the environments they operate in to only authorized individuals.
Identify who's authorized, then limit access to the systems, gear, and rooms.
Exactly. Examine policies, procedures, lists of authorized personnel, interview security guards or facilities managers. Test the access controls. Does a key card open only the right doors?
This applies to employees and visitors, right? But maybe not, like the public lobby.
Generally, yes. Focus is on areas housing the systems or FCI. Think locks on server room doors, limiting who gets keys or badges. Even thinking about where printers are placed so random people can't just grab sensitive printouts.
Good point. Next, PE requirement. PE.L1B.1.INEX. Manage visitors and physical access.
This bundles a few things. Escort visitors and monitor what they do, keep logs of who comes and goes,
Yeah.
and control the physical access devices themselves, keys, badges, etc.
So objectives are escort, monitor, log, identify devices, control devices, manage devices. Lot packed in there.
It is. You'd examine visitor policies, procedures, the visitor logs themselves, inventory lists for keys or badges, talk to reception or security, test the sign-in process, maybe check if logs are being kept properly.
And visitor doesn't mean regular employees with access, right? It's more about outsiders.
Correct. People who don't have permanent authorized access. Examples are escorting a guest throughout their visit, using sign-in, sign-out sheets, having a process for issuing and retrieving keys or badges when someone leaves.
Key things are distinguishing visitors, monitoring them, keeping good logs, and managing those physical keys and cards carefully.
Absolutely.
Okay, 2 more domains. System and Communications Protection, SC. First is SC.L1-B.1.X boundary protection.
Protecting your network edges. Monitor, control, and protect communications at your external boundaries, and also at key internal boundaries between network segments.
Define the boundaries, then monitor, control, and protect the traffic crossing them.
That's it. Examine policies, network diagrams, firewall rules, talk to network admins. Test the firewall, try to reach a blocked site. Check if the monitoring logs the attempt.
So firewalls, routers, maybe internal segmentation.
Yep. Using firewalls to block malicious traffic, restricting which ports and services are open, monitoring the traffic flow. An example is setting up a firewall specifically for a new enclave handling FCI data.
Got it. Next, SC. SCL1B.1.XI public access system separation.
If you have systems that need to be accessible from the public internet, like a web server, you need to isolate them. Implement subnetworks for those components, physically or logically separated from your internal network where the FCI lives.
Keep the public stuff away from the private stuff. Identify the public components, then ensure they're separated.
Exactly. Often done using a DMZ, a demilitarized zone. Look at network architecture diagrams, policies, talk to admins. Test the separation. Can you get from the web server directly to an internal database server? You shouldn't be able to.
Like putting your public job application website in a DMZ separate from the internal HR system.
Perfect example. Identify what's public-facing and make sure it's cordoned off.
Okay, last domain. System and Information Integrity, SI. First is SI.L1-B.1.12 flaw remediation, patching.
Essentially, yes. Identify, report, and correct flaws, vulnerabilities in your systems and software in a timely manner.
Define timely, and then meet those timelines for identifying, reporting, and fixing flaws.
Right. You need defined timeframes. Examine policies, patching procedures, configuration management records, lists of vulnerabilities found and fixed. Talk to the team doing the patching. Test the process. Are patches actually getting deployed within the policy window?
This covers software flaws, firmware bugs,
Yeah.
using things like CVE databases to stay informed.
Exactly. A common practice is having a policy like check vendor sites weekly for patches, deploy critical patches within X days, non-critical within Y days. You need a defined, repeatable process.
Makes sense. Next SI.L1-B.1.Korean.3, malicious code protection, antivirus.
Anti-malware, broadly speaking, yes. Provide protection against malicious code at appropriate locations within your systems.
Identify where you need it, then make sure it's there and working.
Pretty much. Designated locations usually mean endpoints, workstations, servers, email gateways, maybe network entry-exit points. You need protection against viruses, spyware, ransomware, the whole zoo.
How to assess. Examine policies, configuration settings for the anti-malware tools, update records, talk to admins, test it maybe using a safe test file like ICAR to see if it gets detected.
Good idea. Deploying antivirus on all hosts that handle SCI is the baseline example here.
And that leads right into SI.L1B.1.X4V, update malicious code protection, keep it current.
Crucial follow-up. Update those protection mechanisms, the software, and the definitions when new releases are available. Malware changes constantly.
Objective, update when updates are out. Simple enough.
Yep. Check policies, update procedures, log showing definition updates, talk to admins. Test the auto-update feature if you use one. Example, Configuring your antivirus to check for and download new definitions daily. Got to keep it sharp.
Last one, si.l1-b.1.xv, system and file scanning.
Okay, two parts here. Perform periodic scans of your systems for malicious code, and perform real-time scans of files coming in from external sources, downloads, email attachments, USB drives.
Define how often for the periodic scans, then actually do the periodic scans and do the real-time scans of external files.
Got it. Examine policies, scan schedules, scan logs, configuration of the real-time scanner, talk to admins, test it, plug in a USB, does it get scanned, send a test email attachment.
So enabling email attachment scanning, setting up maybe daily or weekly full system scans,
Yeah.
and making sure files from USBs get checked automatically.
Exactly. And make sure that real-time scanning covers various file types, including media files, that might come from outside.
Wow, okay, that's the 15. Quite a bit, even at level 1.
It is. But as we wrap up this deep dive, you can see it's all about establishing those fundamental cybersecurity hygiene practices. Getting these basics right is absolutely essential if you're handling FCI.
Absolutely. And while hopefully this discussion gave you a really good practical overview based on that assessment guide, it is still an overview, right?
Definitely. You really need to get the actual guide, read through the details that apply to your specific situation, and maybe get some help.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, understanding where you stand right now is key. Doing a gap assessment against these 15 requirements can be incredibly helpful. That's something we at Armada Cyber Defense do regularly, help organizations see the gaps and build a plan.
It provides that clear roadmap. Because just listening to us isn't enough, you have to translate it into action. And maybe the big takeaway for you listening is start thinking proactively. How does each of these requirements touch your daily operations?
Right. What are the concrete steps you can take starting now, not just to scrape by and meet the minimum, but to actually build a stronger, more resilient security posture overall?
It's about making cybersecurity, even these basic level 1 controls, just a normal part of how you do business, not an afterthought.